Make sure it starts recording. Okay, I got it. Thank you so much for reminding me. I'm just so excited. You know, it's one of those divine things that's happened when you end up like asking the universe for something and then they present it, because we've been searching for someone that understands about biodynamic farming for the last couple of months. And then we were just connection, and Stephanie came to us, and wonderful connection because she has an experience of growing in both climates in Colorado and also in Puerto Rico. So she understands a lot of what we end up having to do in our kind of tropical region. So we're very, very blessed to have you, since you've had this tropical experience and bringing all of this to us. And plus, she is an amazing permaculture teacher. She's taught, I would say, over 30 permaculture courses, PDCs, which is a lot of PDCs to be teaching for over the years and gaining all kinds of wonderful experience. So before we really start, we're still letting in some people, but let's just go through some housekeeping. I think enough people have probably been on these farm to farmer conversations too. If you put your hand up and we'll ask questions, sometimes depending on what's going on, we might jump in the middle to clarify something. And sometimes we'll just wait to the end as well. So depends on, it's very dynamic what's going on, because we don't want to miss that point. You can put things in the chat. I'll try to get to it. I'm the only one right now hosting. So I'm trying to do a bunch of things, letting people in and also trying to monitor the chat. So be gentle with me. It is taping and I am working on sending you over the tapes. And I know you're going to want this, this recording that we're going to be able to share with you and share with other people as well. And again, I just welcome everybody. And I see already we have people from Trinidad here and other people from the Caribbean. We're just so happy that we were able to do this in Jamaica to share it with the rest of the Caribbean and the world, as a matter of fact. So we are at the point, we always go about 5 minutes to start, and I really want to use a lot of the time for Stephanie to kind of take us through her journey. So the first thing I'm going to ask you is, Stephanie, just tell us how you even got into doing this work and a little bit of history, and then, you know, the floor is yours.
Excellent. Well, I just want to say thank you. So wonderful to meet you and hear about all the good work your group and everyone's doing down there in Jamaica and across the world. So I'm really honored and privileged to be a part of this and to get to know all of you in a deeper way. So I grew up in Florida, and kind of just the regular standard family with a standard American diet, they call it, or the SAD diet. We just ate kind of whatever, and factory food and fast food and quick food and things like that. And when I was 15, I had a health crisis with Hashimoto's disease and kind of got plugged into the regular medical system down there. And we saw lots of doctors, and they all said the same thing, that there's really only one option, and that is to do radioactive iodine and kill the thyroid. Right. So at that time, that's what all the experts said. So, you know, if you don't know better, that's what you do. And that's what we did. And I read my first nutrition book when I was 18, and I read the chapter on thyroids, and I was so offended that no one mentioned any other possible things to try before getting rid of a part of your body that you need to be alive. And really, while that could have been seen as a bad thing, it was one of the greatest gifts to my life, because I was so offended and then just so disillusioned with, well, if I can't trust this industry or whoever is supposed to be the expert, I have to go figure it out myself. And so I just started researching and learning about nutrition. And at that time, I was a river guide in Tennessee. And so I started traveling through Latin America, Costa Rica, Ecuador, Peru, doing river guiding and staying at permaculture farms in between to learn about other forms of sustainable agriculture. And so in that time, I started to learn about medicinal herbs and really get intimate with plants and their relationship to us and to place, and how they work within us and around us. And I was kind of hooked from there. And now that's basically all I do with all my time. My daughter thinks my library is quite boring because 90% of the books are plants and herbs and health and spirituality and all these things. And she thinks that's very boring. She's 13. But it's really my life's work to empower myself and people to live healthy in a place, and for that place to be healthier because of it. And this idea of permaculture, when I first heard of it, was just this, I had always heard that the best thing humans can do to save the environment is to just get out of it and leave it alone. And when I started learning about permaculture, I started to learn strategies like, oh, no, we can do better than that. We can participate in a way that the place is better for having had relationship with us. Um, and then quite a few years later, I started learning about biodynamics, and that really just adding, it's all the horizontal, linear, visible world of permaculture, and then adding the vertical, unseen, spiritual intention world of agriculture to that. I really, really loved and understood biodynamics because it uses a lot of medicinal herbs. And the way we use medicinal herbs in biodynamics, we use them for the farm entity to heal the digestion of the soil or to heal different relationships on the land. And the parallel between how we use them to heal the land and how we use them to heal ourselves just kind of hooked me, and I've been practicing that and lots of other strategies for a long time now. Oh, I think you're muted.
Sorry. So tell me about, right now you have 2 farms I think you're working on. You have the Colorado farm and you have work that you're doing in Puerto Rico. So tell me what you're doing with both of them, and then maybe you could, go into your slideshow and then have a,
Sure.
yeah.
And I'll go into each of those on the slideshow, but
Okay.
we've got a medicinal herb farm here in Colorado at a large 240-acre biodynamic ranch, but the medicinal herbs are 3 acres of that. And then I also work with the Central Rocky Mountain Permaculture Center here in Colorado, and a few other projects that I'll talk about. And then maybe 3 years ago, I started traveling into Puerto Rico, exploring the area and learning about the area, and just fell in love with the people and the place, and started a partnership with a local Puerto Rican man who had some land and a restaurant, but didn't really know, he had had the land for 20 years and he didn't really know what to do with it, or how to really utilize it to not only serve his restaurant, but be this healing retreat place. And so we struck up a partnership, and now I'm working on creating a homestead, educational center, and farm, both for food and certainly medicinal herbs down there in Puerto Rico. So for now, I've been spending the winters. I'll leave here in about a week to head down to the island for at least 6, 7, 8, I don't know, we'll see how many months. I really have missed the tropical climate. I've been in Colorado for 10 years, but I would rather surf than ski. So I might be, certainly I'm done with the winters, but I also feel like my longer term future is down in that area. So transitioning more to being in the Caribbean for much more of my time.
Well, we always have to have people that are your ilk doing good work in the Caribbean. So we definitely want to strike up some partnerships, and we're trying to do more work across the Caribbean because we've kind of been always very North American focused, but we want to be able to start looking at more work across and also into Central America. So this is a good thing for us to start to create more partnerships on island and across the way. So I've already opened up the share with you. So you
okay,
can,
do you want me to just share my screen? It might be easier in case some of the videos.
Yeah, I opened it up so you could share your screen.
Okay, perfect. I'll see how that goes. Okay, can you guys see that?
I can.
You can?
Mhm.
Excellent. Okay. So I'll just go through, it's just a little intro to each of these projects and some of the practices, but we can certainly, mostly I've devoted the time to question and answers, and we can kind of take it as it comes, but I'll give you an idea of most of the bigger projects that I'm involved in, so we can go from there and see how I can be of help to anyone on the call today. So I own in partnership Biodynamic Botanicals, which is a wholesale bulk medicinal herb company. So we do fresh and dry medicinal herbs, about 50 different varieties for apothecaries and people who make their own tinctures and people who are practitioners, herbal practitioners that make their own remedies for their own clients. I do a lot of teaching and classes with everything from little ones in elementary school and how to make little lip balms and lotions and things like that, and gardening, all the way to the elders in some of the communities here. So all age groups. Just really, I feel like my work is just to bring people to the plants and bring the plants to them, and after that, the plants really do all the talking for me. So I practice permaculture, lots of different strategies within that. And permaculture is kind of this melding and holding box for all kinds of different strategies that work well. Biodynamics, which I'll talk a little bit about, lots of seed saving. Here in Colorado, I work with a lot of greenhouses because it's very hard. We're already completely frosted out. There's barely anything except for maybe some kale that can survive at this point here in Colorado. So lots of indoor growing or season extension here in this climate. I'm also really passionate about utilizing the common spaces, so public parks and abandoned lots and things like that to grow food and medicine for whoever might be able to utilize that food and medicine wherever it is. I do a permaculture podcast on KDNK. It's also available on NPR podcasts and iTunes. It's called Living Permaculture. And then the food parks and seed libraries and all kinds of fun. And now the Wild Island Botanicals, also Hacienda Las Pomerosas in Puerto Rico. So this is just a little overview drawing of the different fields out here at Sustainable Settings Ranch. And like I said, it's a very large ranch. This is just maybe a 6-acre view of a smaller section. And some of you who are here early saw some of this video, but I'm just going to play while I talk. I focus on mostly perennial agriculture. So almost all of the medicinal herbs that I utilize are perennial. They come back year after year. Everything from herbs for the mind or the stomach or the immune system or lungs, and really just integrating these plant entities into our lives in a bigger way. As you can see, I utilize living pathways for the most part. So I'll have clovers and nitrogen fixing pathway crops to help feed and cover the soil. And we are here in Colorado, we have 15 inches of rain a year. So it is very dry. So focusing on these perennial crops really helps these, the plants get very big and the roots get very big, and they can reach down into water reserves that other annual plants have a little bit more tough time getting to. The majority of the herbs that we sell are dry. And so this is a big 40-foot refrigerated tractor trailer bed, or that's what it used to be. And we outfitted it as a herb dehydrator. So we have fans and exhaust and intake fans that keep the air moving through the space to dry it out, as well as keeping it dark, because we like to preserve all of the nutrients in the herbs, which means that they cannot be in the sun. This is just one of our clients. It's an apothecary that utilizes the herbs. And so something that we focus on here at Sustainable Settings and at Biodynamic Botanicals is the quality of the herbs. We could water the herbs like crazy and they would grow really, really big, but they would be very watered down and they wouldn't be very efficacious. So we're trying to go the strongest, most potent healing properties that we can. So I'll just go a little bit into biodynamics in case no one has ever heard of that or you're not familiar with the term. Biodynamics was coined by Rudolf Steiner in the 1900s in Germany. And it's about thinking about the farm as a whole organism, as an entity, as a body, and that one piece can't do anything without the other, like our bodies. We focus a lot on energies and rhythms, the elements. We do plant by the moon, but we also plant by the other celestials in the sky. And like I said in the intro, the herbal apothecary for the land, these biodynamic preparations utilizing yarrow and nettle and dandelion and all these herbs that I was very familiar with as a herbalist to heal the human body is what biodynamics uses to heal the farm entity, the farm body. There we go. So biodynamic, bio meaning life, and dynamic, that force and power. Just some of the herbs that we grow. We have a beautiful giant 14,000 foot mountain behind us. That's Mount Sopris there in the background. Rudolf Steiner has the 8 agricultural lectures. So the work that he did, he was in academia and had been continuously been approached by farmers who were having issues with potency of their plants and the health and succumbing to disease and pests and all of these things. And they wanted his help on why, like, what could they do to help improve their farm yields and the quality of food coming off those farms. And so it started with these 8 lectures and has gone, has developed a lot since then. So biodynamics can get, depending on who you're asking, a little bit dogmatic in the rules and the regulations. And I don't tend to work that way because I tend to work from a more intuitive heart space. And for me, it really is about understanding relationships and loving a thing and taking the time to get to know an element or a plant or just a pest or really anything in my surroundings. So I know a little bit more about it before I start with action. So just like in the body, we don't really try to think and focus on the symptoms of the problem, like the aphid or the fungus. We try to put that in perspective of the whole. And so we're looking to heal the whole organism instead of just attack and kill the aphid. And so that really just takes a little bit more time on slowing down and a little bit more love and understanding that the weed or the pest is not the problem. It's a messenger that tells us that a system is out of balance. So just a little chart, because they're always fun to have. We here at the ranch have been doing soil tests for a long, long time. And we had been doing a lot of permaculture practices and composting and all those things for many years. And then we started adding the biodynamic preparations. And these are homeopathic doses. They're very, very small, but they make a huge difference. And so our soil analysis for our pastures just keeps going up and up. And respiration is what this talks about. Respiration is the respiration of the life in the soil. So NRCS measures lots of things, but one of those things is the biological and fungal life in the soil. And that's one of the metrics we like to look at. And so the secret, while it's lots of herbs and preparations and composting, it's also compassion and forgiveness and love for ourselves, for the aphid, for the plants, for the environment that we're in. And when we start opening up in that space, it just changes everything. And we've done lots of very soil tests like I just showed, or seed trials to test which one sprouts faster and all of these things to prove that it works. So you should try it too. Don't take my word for it. And I would expect that you'll be surprised at the difference that you will see when we slow down and open our hearts to what we're doing. So this is just a great example. Biodynamics utilizes lots of these different remedies, and they're created in different ways. One of them is the horn manure, which is the cow horn stuffed with the manure and buried for a certain part of the year. And then you can see the picture on the side. What comes out of that is just this incredibly fungal and bacterial rich transformed manure after 6 months. And that has tons of indigenous microbiology in it that we're then able to cultivate and use across the farm. So yeah, we focus on quality. We'd also get some good quantity too. Okay, one more project. The Central Rocky Mountain Permaculture Institute is an organization that I have worked here in Colorado with for 10 years or so, up on Basalt Mountain at 7,200 feet. These are a lot of greenhouses. It's an off-grid permaculture site. It's one of the oldest in the country, run by Jerome Osentowski. He utilizes a lot of indoor spaces. So this is a tropical greenhouse, and you might recognize some of the plants in the background. The ferny one is a leucaena, which is a nitrogen-fixing tropical agroforestry tree. There's also bananas, and there's taro, and citrus, and pomegranates, and all of these things. And he does this out here in the cold with no fossil fuels, using a bunch of different indoor climate mitigation strategies, which I can talk about if anyone has particular interest in that. And we do the living permaculture together. Jerome is just turned 80 this year, definitely a permaculture elder in our community, and has worked in Baja and Mexico, and makes his home here most of the time in Basalt. But he's coming down to Puerto Rico more often, all the time, as it's a little too cold for him in the winter now too. So permaculture, for anyone on the call that doesn't know much about permaculture, we are generally focusing on perennial crops. It's a design system. We can design all kinds of things, business structures, farms. This was coined by Bill Mollison out of Australia quite a while ago, and is just an amazing design strategy to think about how we live in place and take care of all of our needs, both our physical needs and our emotional, financial, and all sorts of other needs. So as I mentioned on the intro, I'm very passionate about the common spaces that we share and have access to, like public parks. And so the Basalt Food Park is a half-acre public park that about 6 years ago, it just used to be grass. We turned it into a permaculture food forest, a medicinal herb garden, where anybody can come and eat and take herbs, whether it's herbs to cook or herbs like comfrey is what these students are harvesting right now. Comfrey is an amazing herb to heal bones. They used to call it knit bone, a great healer for people with joint issues and bone issues and arthritis and things like that. So this park has everything labeled with Latin common name and usage, and anybody can have anything that they want. We also have cherries and grapes and pears and apples and all kinds of things like that. I'll give you a little walkthrough. I don't know if I'm talking in this one.
No, what did you say?
There we go.
Okay.
So to make sure I wasn't talking in that one when I was touring around. So there's Nanking cherries and lots of different flowers and lots of different medicinal herbs here that grow here in the cold Rocky Mountains.
So is this something that you worked with the Basalt city to organize, and people volunteer to help work with it?
Yes. So at first, they kind of just let me do it, and so I petitioned the town. We had started a seed saving or a seed library at the local library, and I had taught a bunch of classes there, but we wanted a place to grow the seeds nearby that then we could take the classes out of the workshop or out of the indoor space and to the garden so they could really get hands-on. And then we approached the town to see if they would be open to us utilizing the space, and they were really open to it, and we just wanted a little tiny sliver. but they didn't have a plan or an idea for the rest of the park and asked if we did. And I certainly did. And I wanted to have the food forest. And so we gathered lots of community members and joined together and kind of went through the whole process of getting approval within the town. And for a while, it was kind of like the little stepchild park of the town, where they didn't really pay a lot of attention to it or, you know, offer much support, except the support to let us do it, which was huge. At this time, I think there were only 3 public food parks in the mainland of the United States. And so it was kind of out of the box of what they knew. They were very worried that bears were going to be there, or homeless people were going to be there eating all the food, and just all of these really interesting fears that we were able to quell enough to let the project go forward. And after maybe 4 years or so of it really doing well and thriving and people using it and it getting some press and kind of cred for the town, they came back in and kind of re-adopted it. So now they, you know, take care of the irrigation and mow the pathways. And I didn't even have to plant anything or shovel anything this year. I'm now more in a consulting space where if they have a trouble or they don't, you know, they have a pest issue or a plant issue or any of that, they'll call me. But other than that, I've laid out how to maintain it, and we designed it to be super, super low maintenance, and they're doing great. And it's been thriving ever since. And so the project has kind of grown up and has its own legs now and its own place in the community. So we're really happy about that.
That's great. I do have a question, because you did say something about a seed library. So you're working within the library. How does a seed library work in terms of that? People going in and getting seeds?
Yeah,
In the
so
public library?
in a regular library. This was maybe 8 years ago. We started it I had been teaching classes there on gardening and stuff like that. And I'm a big seed saver. And here in Colorado, because it's so cold and it's so dry, people moving here from another place, they really have a hard time because they want to grow like big boy tomato or some variety that they're used to. And it just doesn't do well here. And people get very disillusioned with how hard it is to grow. And it really, to me, is a lot of those genetics. It's a lot about just having the right variety that's adapted to the place that you're growing. And so I approached the library to see, and I thought the library would just be a perfect place to house it. It was also in the I guess constant time where we're worried about companies that are patenting and trying to own seeds. And that's not a direction I think we should move into. So having seeds at a library accessible to all people was really important to me. And so there's a big cabinet, and a lot of the seeds are donated from companies. And then any of the avid seed savers kind of come together every year in the fall with all the seeds that they have saved. And they package them up into little packages, all donation time, all of us gathering together, and talk about, you know, whose garden it was grown in and what it is and this and that. And then people are allowed to, they go check them out, but there's no fine. You don't have to return it. The hope is that you'll come to a free seed saving workshop, or maybe a few, and then you will in time first just plant them. That's all we need, is more people planting gardens. But if you're feeling inspired and you grow it out to seed and you want to return some of that seed, then you can share it with other people.
Okay, yeah, thanks for sharing.
Yeah, you're welcome. Okay. So then now we're starting this project in Puerto Rico. So it is some small acreage, 12 acres in very dense jungle, surrounded by about 100 acres of different properties that have been abandoned for 50 plus years, as was this property. So it used to be all cattle grazed, so mostly cleared about 50 years ago. But since then, everything has been growing back. And so the overstory is a lot of the invasive tree species like the African tulipan, but it's a really fast growing nitrogen fixing softwood tree, and that comprises the overstory at this point. And then the understory are these hardwoods that used to be the overstory, but they're young now, but they're recovering, and they will soon be the overstory in this area. And so we're doing, I'm building an off-grid shipping container home. So we've got that started with solar and water with the springs and gravity-fed water systems, as well as a ton of perennial agriculture, medicinal herbs, and some outdoor community spaces that we're starting to build. Let's see.
And you, of course, so you're a permaculturist, so you would have done all your design planning and trying to get more people in Jamaica to take permaculture courses and also start to think in terms of design before you interact with the land, design, and then and then go out and do stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And so we spent the first 4 or 5 months or so just in a tent, moving the tent from place to place around the property, really understanding what the water does, what the wind does, what the plant communities are that exist there, what the soils are like, and thinking about how we can integrate into that space the best that we can. So permaculture really highlights that first step, which is observation. The more we can, and I feel like this is such a useful thought in any area of my life, whether it's meeting a new person or a new plant or a new place, trying to reserve as much as we can our linear mind judgment and our emotional responses, and just sitting and watching and listening and learning and opening our heart and our minds, but without the out breath. Permaculture talks a lot about how the first 6 principles are in breath. They're all like gathering information and observations and understanding. And then after that, once you've got all of that, then you can start out breathing into design and thinking about how it's not about a chicken coop and it's not about my house. It's about the whole entity of the place that I'm at and a life. And so how did these, I need a house and I want a chicken coop. And so how do I put those things together in a way that they no longer stand alone, that the yields of one feed the needs of the other, that the waste of one feeds the needs of the other. And so you just start to, they call it a needs and yields analysis, or in permaculture, you'll see this, they call it the permaculture chicken. It's like this drawing of a chicken, and there's all these, the needs and yields. So what does a chicken do just by nature of being a chicken? It scratches, it eats bugs, it makes eggs, it makes noise, it makes manure. And then what does it need? It needs shelter, it needs food, it needs companionship. And then you do that for all the different pieces in your design. And then you start to see the patterns of, oh, like this thing would be better near this thing, so that way I'm not moving the chicken manure over to the garden or the compost bin. I have the compost area downhill of my chicken yard, so that it's really easy to, without a lot of my effort, just push that material downhill to where it can compost and it's clean for the chickens. So you just start to never think of one element alone, because it's not alone, but how can the one element work with all the other elements to be healthier together? And also for the permacultural designer, so that hopefully we can find time for the hammock a little bit. Okay, so yeah, that's basically it. We are having a ecological agriculture course where you earn your PDC in Puerto Rico. I also hope to come to Jamaica and work with all of you lovely people in your home. And that's pretty much all for my presentation, but happy to answer any questions or go deeper on anything. I know we kind of covered a lot in a little time. But yeah,
excellent presentation, and what a lot of wonderful work that you've been at and enjoying and loving it. I can tell by the way how the designs and especially when I'm looking at your medicinals and how the plants look really healthy and the space looks really great, great design. So I know that we already have some questions already lined up. I think I saw a question in the chat. You can unmute. I think there's somebody that had a question in there too, while they're getting themselves organized. Let's see, I had a question. What was my question? In terms of just like permaculture and how do you see, are you seeing a lot more people taking up permaculture, especially in these times where there is with COVID and people getting back on the land? What are you seeing from your view shed?
Yeah, I see a lot more interest in permaculture and just in agriculture in general, even from the backyard garden. It's really been inspiring as one of the great things out of this pandemic is, for farmers, we were getting warned by the seed companies, like you have to get your order in because we're going to run out of seed. Which one is like, oh, we should have more seed, but how exciting that everyone or so many more people were thinking, oh goodness, maybe toilet paper isn't the only thing that's going to be out in the stores. maybe I need to grow here. It would be mullein, which is they call it the toilet paper plant. So we just saw this huge run on seeds, and also this here at the ranch we have a raw dairy. We do milk, cream, butter, kefir, yogurt. We also have cow meat, lamb, chicken, turkey, and pig. And we don't do a ton of anything. We have abundance, but we only have our dairy herds maybe 12 cows. And here in Colorado, it's illegal to buy raw dairy unless you are a part owner of the cow. So all of our members own a share of a cow that allows them to have their milk however they want. And so we just saw this huge uptick in people who were like, oh, maybe we should support that local farm down the street, because what if City Market, which is our grocery store, as they started to see shelves become empty, that reminded them that, oh, there's all these amazing food producers here. I should make sure that I support them so that they will have food for me when I need it. So that was really inspiring. And then from a permaculture workshop perspective, definitely all the courses are just filling up to capacity. And we added a couple extra this year, both here at this ranch as well as at the Permaculture Institute, to try to help. And for me, I farm primarily as my main avenue of income, but also just where I spend the majority of my time. But I just felt this even stronger desire to, even if I was tired, to share more and to take all the teaching gigs and go speak wherever anyone wanted me to speak about this, because the time, it just felt extra important. Okay, this has been fun, but let's get to it. We have the skills, we have the knowledge, let's grow our food. And not only, I've seen the difference it has made in my life, the difference between store-bought food and homegrown food, or food grown from a farmer that I know where it was just picked, that I want people to have that health. I want them to feel the difference that makes in your life.
Yeah, I've been actually really encouraging everybody. I'm like, the best thing you could do around this time, because we're seeing it, the idea of the scarcity coming at us. And I'm always like, the best time, you better know a farmer.
Yeah.
Wait to the very end to start supporting farms, because be nice to us. We're going to be able to help you out. I see there's Alan's on. Could you unmute and ask your question? Okay,
are you hearing me now?
Nope. Yeah, I'm hearing you.
All right. Barry had a question. We had put it in the chat, but I'll just say it. So the first question you wanted to know was, Stephanie, how did you decide what plants went into the park that you all established? And do you have to, or how do you manage over harvesting in that space?
So I really wanted it to be as low maintenance as possible, because while feeding people and educating people was part of the goal, the other goal is to convince towns that it's not that big of a pain, that their grass park that they have everywhere, they have like 82 grass parks, that moving some of that to edible and medicinal species wouldn't cost them anymore. It wouldn't take any more work, a little bit upfront, but from the maintenance perspective. So I really picked plants that the genetics were already from here and adapted to this high altitude, low water, cold environment. So the success was going to be high, really, really resilient, strong plants, ones that were really easy to maintain and didn't have a ton of pest or disease issues or upkeep issues to keep that low maintenance kind of feel. In that scenario, also, I had to really consider, because I'm pushing the boundary of what people think public spaces should be and should look like. So a lot of flowers, all edible and medicinal, but a lot of like these plants that look ornamental. They look like what you would see in your little landscaping in the town, except they're, you know, useful for us for food and medicine, so that I didn't push the county so far that they're like, that's ugly and messy, we don't want that. So highlighting the aesthetics, so the project went really well. And then just large food producers. So we dealt with a different issue here, and it's probably more culturally that I had to convince people to eat the plants. They're like raspberries and apples and plants. They weren't that weird. I do have some stuff like currants and gooseberries that, you know, maybe people's grandmothers would recognize, but some of the younger people don't really see or use those plants. They're not in the grocery store, so they wouldn't know what they were. But a lot of the plants were very recognizable. But there's this feeling, at least in this community, of like, I didn't plant it, it's not mine, I'm not allowed to touch it. And it didn't matter how many signs in how many languages that I put up. It just took time. It just took time for people to understand what the project was doing, and how to engage with it, and to kind of change this idea that public parks are the public's. They're ours. We pay for them. They belong to you if you live in this community. But it doesn't feel like that. It feels like a place that belongs to the town with the town's rules, that you can only interact with how the town says because it's theirs. And it's not, it's ours. And so kind of reprogramming that whole thought, it took years. I have a writer for the newspaper that loves the project, and people weren't eating the raspberries, and they're like, right, they're all over and they're gorgeous. And I would tell people, hey, eat the raspberries. And they're like, oh, are they poisonous? I'm like, no, they're not poisonous. They're just like the ones at the store, but way better. And so we took the little plastic shells that the berries come in the grocery store. We went and got some from the grocery store empty and stuck them on the plant. So then people saw them and were like, oh, it's the same thing. I was like, okay. And so we also did a lot of work with the elementary school, because they were our biggest ambassadors. We took all the elementary school classes to the garden, and they don't have those same hesitations that a lot of the adults do. And so they're just eating everything. And so then they started telling all their parents, like, no, you're allowed to eat there. Look at the sign, read the sign. So we haven't had an issue of over harvesting. And that's actually kind of a good thing here, because we do have bears. And the other biggest concern of the town was that if there's rotting fruit on the ground, that will attract bears, and that'll be a safety issue with people. And so the more people eat, the better. And then we don't have to worry about the bears. And I feel like if all the food gets eaten and the park is going really well, then maybe the town will take one more of their 82 grass parks and they could plant food in there also.
Amazing. Thank you so much for that.
Yeah, you're welcome.
And Zinga, that answered your question, I think. I see Kingsley, Kingsley's on. You can unmute Kingsley and ask your question.
Hi, I'm interested in finding out. I hear you talk about backyard gardening. How would you like in like a small space? Because most of the housing development in Jamaica are very small. They are less than a quarter acre. And how would you encourage somebody in doing some medicinal and implementing some level of permaculture in that small space?
Sure, thank you for that questions. One of the really exciting things about permaculture is its ability to do a lot in a small space. And so you could take permaculture and do it big, but also I don't know if you've seen like any of the drawings of a food forest guild, they call it, or I like to call it a plant family. And so in a normal kind of traditional farm or orchard, you have a tree, and then there's like 20 feet of grass or bare soil, and then a tree, and then a tree. And so they're all very widely spaced. And so we have in our mind that the plants need all of that space. And in permaculture, we kind of go the other direction, that yes, while you wouldn't want 5 jackfruit trees on top of each other, you can have one jackfruit tree as the overstory. So we're mimicking all the layers of a forest. So instead of only growing out, we're growing in layers from top to bottom. And so we have our overstory tree, which could be, for here, it would be an apple. For you guys down there, a jackfruit or a breadfruit or all manner of tree, depending on the size of your yard. So that's our overstory. And then we would have something in the understory, which would be a much smaller tree. And the smaller the tree, the more often it is adapted to a little bit more shade. And as you go lower, then you have a shrub. And then as you go lower, you've got some kind of herbaceous layer, a medicinal herb, perhaps. And that medicinal herb is doing a few things. It's making medicine, of course. They're almost all making flowers, which bring in pollinators, which help to pollinate your overstory tree. And then it's also really, really strong smelling. So it becomes a plant that not only attracts those beneficial pollinators, but also repels some of the insects that might want to eat on your other tree because the smell is so strong and it confuses them. And then you have a ground cover layer that can feed the whole system, but also could feed yourself, like a sweet potato, perhaps, would be a great plant that covers the ground so it limits weed competition. It's adapted to an understory or edge environment. It also makes sweet potatoes, not only the potato, the root crop that you can eat, but also the greens that are highly edible. And so by stacking many plants, as long as you, like we were talking about, you have to know what is the plant, what is it like, what does it make, really get to know all the elements of it. And then you'll start to see like, oh, okay, so it would like to be on the south where it gets this kind of sun or this kind of wind or this kind of moisture. It would be like to be in the understory because it can thrive there. Or it's a vine maybe that grows up like a parcha, a passion fruit that grows up the tree and can access its own sun and drop fruit down. So by putting those things much closer together than you would imagine, you can stack many plants and many yields in a small space. You just have to get to know the plants and what they like and who is a good companion to who. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thanks.
If you have a follow-up question, I can answer that too.
Yeah. I noticed you have a lot of things on medicinal plants, and especially in this time, seeing that you are also working in Puerto Rico, which the climate is close to ours. What kind of medicinal plants would you recommend planting for somebody beginning now?
Sure. So some of my favorites, and I actually grow this one here, but it's, if you guys saw it between here and what we can do in the Caribbean, it's almost laughable that I grow it here. So there's a plant called Tulsi, holy basil. It's a perennial basil from India, and there's quite a few different varieties. It's a very sacred plant in India, very much related to their gods. And it is, and they call it an adaptogen herb. So it's an herb that helps normalize your systems in your body. So your hormonal system, your immune system. It has a special affinity for the mind and blood flow in the brain and memory function. It's one of my favorite herbs because it's just so so healthy for us to consume on a regular basis. It's more like a food type herb where you don't have to take it for a little bit and then stop. You can take it all the time, and it's only going to be more efficacious and better for you over time, and it tastes really good. So that's here. We can only grow it because it doesn't like a frost. So we grow it as an annual, and it only maybe gets like 2 feet tall. And the ones I have in Puerto Rico are already above my head in only 8-month period. And they'll perennialize and stay there for many, many years to come. They're also really well adapted to partial shade. So they're a great understory plant. And they have these flowers that the pollinators, like, you will barely even be able to touch it. There'll be so many pollinators on top of it in the middle of the day. So that's definitely one of my favorite herbs for no matter where you live, but certainly in a more tropical climate, you'll get a much better yield. You guys, I'm sure, have turmeric and ginger, which are amazing herbs for digestion, for the ginger being that warming herb that we consume anyway, just because it tastes really lovely, but an incredible antiviral herb, an incredible herb to just warm the digestive tract and keep all of your food moving and digesting really well. Turmeric being an amazing anti-inflammatory herb that we harvest the root as well. And again, it's those culinary crossovers, the herbs that are food and herb also. And then I mentioned the passion fruit is another one of my favorite plants. And we're used to using passion fruit for the fruit, but the leaves and the flowers are such a great, they call it a nervine. So it's an herb for the nervous system that helps to calm it down. Some people, it makes them a little bit sleepy. Some people, it just more takes the edge off. People who are suffering from anxiety or nervousness or tragedy or grief. It's just a really, you take the leaves and the vine and the flowers, and you can make them into tea, fresh or dried. And it's just a great herb to have around for people, anyone who's suffering from anxiety, and maybe all of us are suffering from a little bit right now, but also for people who have epilepsy or nervous system disorders, Parkinson's, things like that. It's just a really lovely herb, and it's so abundant in its foliage growth. And we also get some yummy fruit from it too. So I think those are 4 of my favorite ones, but lemongrass and planting all kinds of other amazing medicinal herbs. And I could go on about medicinal herbs. We could do a whole class on that too.
Don't worry, I'm coming right at you with that one. Just before the next person's up, Jermaine has a question, but Jermaine, could you just give me 1 second? I want, is it Risha from Trinidad and Tobago? You had something in the chat you want to ask?
Oh, sure. You had partly answered my question with the permaculture, but what I wanted to find out, because now we're hearing so much about the permaculture and biodynamics, but there is the organic agriculture. So I was wondering if you can give a comparison of these different methods on the health, the growth time of crops, the environment.
Sure. And so I think they all have tons of crossover, and some of them nest within the other. So you can't have a biodynamic farm that isn't organic. You can't have a permaculture farm that isn't organic. And I'm speaking more to the practice and less to like a certification from a government or something, more to just the organic, meaning no chemicals utilized, chemical fertilizer or pesticides or herbicides. And so that's kind of the bare minimum, I think, is let's get toxins out of our systems. Let's stop making our plants junkies for these drugs of chemical fertilizers, because what happens beyond any health implications that they have on us and the soil is because these nutrients are so quickly available, the plants take them up and forget how to create relationship with the soil bacteria and the soil fungi. And the soil bacteria and the fungi, those relationships are what help the plants get what they need from the soil. And it's another full class, like soil is just the most fascinating thing to get into, and how the plant, you know, talks to the soil microbes and how they interact to help each other and provide what each other needs is so interesting. And so the first step is get, and in our own health too, get the chemicals out of your body, out of your land, out of your plants. We have everything we need to feed our plants and take care of our farms, and it does not need to come from a bottle. We can make it, we can grow it. So organic would be the bare minimum of what I would expect, or the starting point for lots of people to move from chemical to organic, and then we start adding these other things. So permaculture then, while it is mostly focused on agriculture, and definitely that's where most of my experience comes in, is more of the practical application of permaculture on land and farming systems and home sites and homesteads. Permaculture is at its core a design system that seeks to integrate parts into a whole that makes that whole resilient. And when we're speaking of farms, that's like we were talking about, like it's not a chicken, it's not an apple tree or a jackfruit tree or a passion fruit on its own. We have to think about how those things interact together to make a whole that's better. And so permaculture likes to say that one of its kind of quotes is, it depends. That you can never ever, there's no blanket answer like, oh, what do I do with my chickens? Well, it depends. Where do you live? What are your soils like? Da, 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 da. So it's a very individualized system. In addition, they like to say that it's kind of a basket for anything that works. No matter, a lot of the strategies, they're definitely not created by Bill Mollison, the Australian who coined the term. These are strategies that Indigenous people from all across the world have utilized, and he just kind of gathered every strategy that he saw that works, that people tried and had great success with, and put it in a basket, called it permaculture, and then the conversation has been evolving since then. Here in Colorado, in the urban centers of Denver, they use permaculture and they don't even really talk about plants. It's all social permaculture. It's all urban design and system designs and business design and all these different things. So it's really something that can go outside of agriculture. But I like to think about it in space of agriculture because we all need to eat. And also we want to live together and work together, and permaculture can help with that. Biodynamics is much more about agriculture for the most part, except that it considers, good composting, crop rotation, perennial agriculture, fertility cycles, all those things. But then it starts to think about, what effect does my intention and thought have on a plant when I'm cultivating it? And does that energy imprint into my zucchini? And then does that affect the person who eats it? And in biodynamics, their kind of tagline is, everything matters. How I feel when I plant this seed matters to the person who consumes it as medicine. St. John's wort is an herb that we think of as something people use for sadness. And to think about some of these gigantic farms in other countries that produce St. John's wort with bordering slave labor, people who are mistreated and sad and unhealthy, and they're out there picking the flowers that are supposed to bring joy to me and happiness to my heart. that doesn't make sense to me. So I feel like I tell my daughter sometimes, I try to get her to help me as much as I can on the farm. But if she's got a bad attitude, I don't want you here. I don't want your negativity getting into my plants that are supposed to make people happy and healthy. Like, you come back when you're feeling better with a song in your heart. And so in biodynamics, it starts to talk about how important that is.
Excellent, excellent. Because we've been talking about the water and how much it picks up that vibration. And if you're not, you know, in a good state, and how much it picks up, and there's tons of studies on that. So it's wonderful to hear you, you know, reinforce that. It's so important. I hope that answered your question. It was a great answer. Jermaine, you want to unmute and jump in? Thanks for being so patient.
Sure. My question is it that you guys will have a course in permaculture in the future? Because I joined a bit late, but I would be interested in the courses and the different ideas, because, you know, this is something that I would want to do probably for my community, in regards to I have a garden space that used to be maintained for flowers and other things, that I think these ideas could be incorporated, you know, within that space. So if you guys have the intention to have such a course, I would be definitely interested, and I'm sure that there's someone else that I could recommend to be a part of it.
Well, we are actually having a course. We've had about 6 permaculture courses. Usually every year we have a permaculture course, usually in January or February. A couple of times we've had it twice a year. Usually Chuck Marsh, who's one of our permaculture gurus, he passed away, but he would teach, and Jeremiah Kidd. There's a number of people on the call that knows Jeremiah. And we're actually hoping that Stephanie would also this year grace us with her presence and teach a course or 2. So we're trying to bring more permaculture teachers in. It's so important for us to be able to look at the strategies, and not just about the farming, but a holistic approach. And from I learned about permaculture, I think it's been about, I've been here for about 12 years, and I've been encouraging everybody to do permaculture first before they, or even if they have already built stuff, they can still jump in and do a bunch of permaculture to you know, work on their homestead or their apartments or their farms. I really encourage everybody, and what we've done here at Source is mix the permaculture PDC with an organic farming. So it's a 1-month course, but I'm just alone to have permaculture as a PDC, an offering. And we've done weekend courses as well. It's so important. So yes, I will, if you put your name, if your email in the chat, I will make sure that we sign you up to the list. But definitely want to have Stephanie on board to do a permaculture course. So we've just been, you know, when I found her, I was like, oh my God, this is so exciting. So, and what we also want to have more people that are on island that understand these principles, and that can also share, to share them, and actually to start embodying them and start teaching it as well. So yes. Mitzi,
Right,
pardon me? Oh, sorry.
So I'm saying thanks much, and good job to our presenter. She did a good job for the little part that I got. It was a good presentation. That's
Thank
Stephanie,
you.
right?
Yes, thank you. Glad to have you on.
Sure.
Mitzi, I see that your hands are up.
Hi.
Huh?
I'm all fired up and excited.
Okay.
Yay, that's what we need.
So I stepped away from the phone for a minute to go outside to somebody, and I didn't hear, I only came back in time to hear her saying a herb that helps with, I think it may be her favorite herb that came before, she said it before ginger and turmeric. What was it?
It's a
That
whole,
helps with dementia and,
The holy basil.
Oh, okay. And my next question, which are not a lot of people, is how soon before you get to Jamaica?
I'm working on it, and since this relationship has been, I've been getting to know Nicola and what everyone is doing there. I'm so excited. I've never been to Jamaica. So excited to get out there, and I'll just be a few islands away.
Right.
I am looking at doing, hopefully, it's kind of relying on a sailboat captain that I've recently been connected with. But my goal is in January, the second 2 weeks, if it all lines up, is to sail a few of the islands in the Caribbean instead of having to fly, back and forth. So that's my goal. So fingers crossed. He's a traditional farmer in the Dominican Republic, does like soybean and corn and more chemical farming, but he's like interested in permaculture, but also interested in sailing, and he's a friend of some of my friends in Dominica, and that would be a great way to just get over there and say hi and see what you're up to. So if you know any sailboat captains that are coming to Puerto Rico, let me know.
I will check it out.
I'll jump on. I feel like we could get plants through.
All right.
But either way, hopefully sometime this winter for sure, I'll be able to get out there and we can see what we can do and how we can connect.
Okay, great.
Okay, Sam, I see your hands up. You can unmute.
Yeah, sure. Hi, good evening, everyone,
Good evening.
and especially to you, Stephanie.
Hi, Sam.
I have two questions for you. From a financial viability perspective, do you choose the herbs and market them after, or do you do market research first and then you plant the herbs? And the second question is, are you exposed to predial larceny, which is the theft of produced crops? And if so, how do you address those issues on your ranch or anywhere else?
Sure. I'll kind of answer the second question first. I'm not too familiar with that. Something really exciting about the medicinal herbs is most people don't know what they are. So if you happen to be in an area that, and I'm just assuming, I'm not exactly familiar with the term, that just means people stealing your crops.
Yes.
When most of the medicinal herbs, like no one knows what they are. Even people, I have herb schools out here with clinical herbalists who are in training to treat people with herbs, and most of them don't even know what the plants look like in real life. And so it kind of, they mostly just look like ornamental gardens, like flower gardens. And so I don't expect that they would have the same draw for people if you're dealing with a large theft issue. Your first question though, when I first started, I had a product line. And so I was making, with some other partners of mine, tinctures and teas and salves and oils and lotions and all of these products. And we were in a bunch of different stores and elixir bars and all of these fun things. And so we were selling that way. And as the product line got bigger and bigger, we were selling more and more. I just couldn't find the quality of herbs that I wanted once I grew past what I could grow myself. And so I decided to close that. And one partner stayed in the industry and I went to the growing, and we still are connected and she buys from me. But so I had a really intimate inside view into what the buyers would want and how which herbs are just kind of classically always in need. And there are some herbs that are trendy, like if someone on some big, doctor on some news show on mainstream media says, oh, you should use turmeric, then turmeric gets really hot for a short period of time and then it goes down again. And so I don't really pay attention to those trends. More like looking at which herbs just first, I call it the pain in the ass factor. So I rate all of my herbs wherever my farm is based on, what grows there, what's easy to harvest, what's easy to process, how big of a pain in the ass is it to grow or process or whatever. And so I have all these metrics. What's its value on the market? How does it fit into my system? And so I rate the herbs based on that. And then those are the ones I pursue. And so the first time I was here, you don't really know what's going to be you can have an idea of what's going to be easy to grow in your environment, but with your tractor or no tractor, with your particular system or elevation or slope, or if you're close to the ocean, all those things are going to make your plants a little bit different. So I always gather, and this is what I did in Puerto Rico as well, because even though I've grown in the tropics, I haven't grown on this site with this soil. So it's always going to be some new information to gather. So I will take my 20 top herbs that I think like, okay, they should grow. They definitely grow in this climate. They have a good value. They have a steady kind of interest that's long-term. And I think they're going to do good. So I'll try those 20 herbs and see which ones. And after a year or so, sometimes less, sometimes more, it will reveal itself that maybe 5 or 6 of those herbs, and while I'm an herbalist, so I'm going to grow hundreds of herbs, that doesn't mean all of them I'm going to market and sell. So maybe 5 or so herbs will be the winners, like, okay, they do great in my system. They don't have disease or pest issues. They like my soil. They have a good market. They have a good value, and they work with the infrastructure I have. And then those ones will be the ones that I will then increase the acreage that I'm growing on. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. It's something to work with. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
But I just want to pick on the second question a little bit more. So I understand what you're saying about the herbs that persons may not know about them. However, what about the other crops, the soybeans, the corn, the squash, the pumpkins, the pigs, the goats, the cattle? I mean, how do you address theft of those, or the potential theft of those, and farm safety and security?
Sure. Yeah, that's a tough one depending on the area that you're at. And we certainly in Puerto Rico have been warned by some neighbors about some that pigs are, Puerto Ricans love pig, and that those would be potentially a very risky animal to use and cultivate and tend if we were very visible from the road. So a lot of and we are raising just a very small number of pigs, but we do it in a different area that's less visible. We put up a big hedgerow so that it's not as seen from someone who's not integrated into the farm. I can't say that I have all the answers for that one, and it's a complicated question that, you know, thankfully I haven't had to deal with too much yet, except for just some warnings from some neighbors. So I'll be thinking about it as we go, and maybe you guys there have a better answer to that. And I don't corn and soy, I don't tend to mess with and grow too much, just because for me, I don't think commercially the price, I can't compete on a price point with large scale chemical farming of soy and corn. So I don't even try to get into those bigger commodity crops. I would rather grow specialty crops that have a smaller market, but I'm a smaller farmer, and a higher value. That doesn't necessarily answer the theft issue. If someone knows what they're looking for, yeah, I'm not really, I don't know.
Well, just
Yeah, man. Thank you very much.
You're
Sam,
welcome.
that's actually another show we're gonna. That's something that we have a big problem here in Jamaica. And it discourages people from even wanting to farm because so much stuff is taken, and it is actually one of the. We're gonna have somebody come and speak on that particular topic because it really is an issue. But again, with the medicinals, you know, for us, a lot of it is like, what's that bush, and who are they gonna sell it to? So. And a lot of the things that we have as medicinals that we could be growing, I keep saying to people that there's more, you know, sometimes we're growing some crops. Yes, we might want to grow for food, but if you're doing certain other things, you have to look at the price point that you could possibly get. And there's a lot of things that we have here on island that we could actually sell for medicinals, but we don't, because we're not thinking in that way. And so most of the time people don't interested in, you know, not even lemongrass or leaf of life or any of these other things that just kind of grow wild because it's just like, oh, we have this in our backyard and thinking about it, but actually in some places and certain things that they actually there is a good price on it. I see Jennifer on. Jennifer, you can go on mute. Jennifer, are you there? Not hearing you. We see your lovely face, but we're not hearing you. All right, so maybe you can we'll get you back on again. Or if you type it into the chat, because we're just not hearing your voice. I see the Allens again. Your hand's up, you want to ask a question until we get Jennifer's question?
Sure. Hi again, Stephanie.
Hi.
It's funny, Nicola, you brought up exactly what I wanted to talk about or touch on was the wild or local herbs that are smack dab in our environments. Do you experience that, Stephanie? And how did you include them in your plan for the herbs? Because it's something that we would be interested in doing.
Sure. I mean, the weeds that everyone rips out of their gardens because they're just everywhere and so abundant and just such in the way. Like for here, it would be dandelion, burdock, thistle, quite a few herbs that are just amazing healers of the land, but healers of us. A lot of them detoxifying herbs that's what they're doing. They're healing the land, but we all need probably more detoxification support than we are currently utilizing. But they're in super high demand here. So some of the thing I've had to work with, and when I work with small producers, they're a little bit more willing to try an herb that isn't like the traditional variety that the big market wants. And so like milk thistle is an herb that is very popular commercially for detoxification, but we have thistles here that are like 100 different kinds of amazing thistles that are great detoxifiers, but they're not like that thistle. So finding the right buyer that isn't beholden to like the market pressure of a specific variety and can work with you to utilize the herbs that are in abundance in your area. And that's usually small producers, herbalists that treat clients more directly. So I have lots of relationships with them. But I mean, dandelion is this herb here that people will break their backs to try to eliminate from their yard and their lawn, and they just go to these extreme levels, and it is just every single part of it is medicinal and useful and valuable from a both nutrition and detoxification standpoint. So I use most of them, and I have a phrase I say, if you can't beat them, eat them. And so I make all kinds of like weed teas and weed salads and things like that. And so in the tropics, and I am still learning a lot of the herbs that grow in Puerto Rico because a lot of the local people around me, they know them really well and what they're for, but they call things like, they just call it salvia, which is a sage, but salvia is a family of plants that has like thousands of different varietals. And so I'm still kind of keying out. I know I have salvia and I know that my local neighbors use it a lot, but figuring out which variety it is so that if I were to commercialize it in any way or offer it to someone, I could really offer them a very clear picture of the exact variety that it is. So I'm still uncovering that. I'm not sure if that fully answers your question, but those wild weeds and herbs are the ones that I consume more of than even the commercial varieties that I sell.
Yes, it does. It's really, really informative. And I can't wait for you to get here. So, because I'd love to have you come through our place and see what we have there. It's just crazy the amount of wild things that we are finding every day, or finding us? I'm not sure which it is, but
A little of both, maybe.
I think so. All right. Thanks
Revealing
again.
themselves to you.
That's it. That's it.
So Jennifer, do you want to try again, or do you want to put the question in the chat? Hello, I see that you're trying. Okay,
I see you're off mute.
okay, well, if you type in the chat right before.
Oh, I see it.
I have a question. Earlier on, you kind of spoke up a little bit before about that a lot of the things that you're doing, you're trying to use a lot of the herbs to actually heal the soil again. And we do that obviously with certain things like making neem teas for certain things, but also using it in the soil. What other things have you preparations in terms of a biodynamic? Can you give us one of those examples that you do?
Of the biodynamic preparation herbs?
Yeah, as a tea or something that you make.
Yeah, and so one thing I think we have a great opportunity for in biodynamics, and maybe I can enlist you in my partnership of this exploration. All of these practices are evolving. And when Steiner came up with these preparations, it was in Germany at a certain time in his climate. And so they transfer well to here in Colorado: yarrow, dandelion, nettle, valerian. But a lot of the herbs, we could find a variety that grows more in the tropics. Or perhaps there's a plant that does a similar action in the human body, which then would likely mean it does that in the farm body as well. And so taking these, and this is where we move away from that dogma, taking these practices and this structure that was set up at a certain time in a certain place, understanding its purpose and its point, and then adapting it to the place that we are. I'm 100%, not 100%, I'm very certain that Steiner did not want us in the tropics importing preparations made in Germany or in the northern United States from plants that only grow here to then use on our farm in the Caribbean. That wouldn't make any sense. Unfortunately, he's passed away, so we can't ask him that question, but my heart tells me he would want us to take, there's no way he would recommend that. So we need to then take the spirit and the heart and the intention of this practice and make it our own for our own place. So I make personally plant teas and fertilizer teas out of all kinds of things. My favorite thing to do with weeds, plants that I don't want in a certain place, when I'm weeding them out, like they're there for a reason. They're there to heal the soil, to balance a mineral or balance a soil relationship. So I may not want them, right? Because they're getting in the way of the plant that I do want. But I love that it's there, and I respect why it's there, even if I don't fully understand it. So when I am weeding, I always have big bins in like different parts of my gardens and farms. And so whatever I weed out, like here it would be bindweed or thistle, I take that out and then I will put it in a big vat of water and let that ferment. And then I'll water it back in to the same place that I removed it from. So the same minerals and carbon and all of the things that that plant was trying to do in that place, maybe not all the things, but many of those things, I'm returning back and respecting the knowledge that that plant was there for a reason. I may not want it there, and it might be getting in my way of what I do want there. So I'm going to pull it out if I can't leave it, but loving that, respecting that, working with it, and then returning it back. So I just call them weed teas. And I just make tons of weed tea and spread it all around my gardens, especially if a certain weed was like dominating a certain area. There's a reason for that, even if I don't fully understand its practice and why it's there, or if I don't want it there, but I know that it's doing something really important. So I respect that, and then I try to return it when I can.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is very important because we tend to want to rip up, and I mean, there's a story about the shaman lady, and we were pulling it out and it was everywhere. And I kept saying, this is good for something. I know this is a reason for it to be here. And then, you know, when we looked at it, it was actually, I found it like actually there's lots of teas. It was, you know, a very important tea that people were actually needing to utilize. So when I start to see certain things in certain places, like, why is it here? And then looking at what is it doing? Why is it, you know, having the relationship with that area. Jennifer, I'm going to switch to Jennifer, but also in terms of the relationship, we need in the tropics, there's lots of knowledge that is indigenously here. And we need to obviously share that and look at the systems, because if we have the protocols, then we can start to kind of share that information. But I think across that, we need to be working. They've been somewhat isolated on island to island, and we have not been like having conversations across, which we should be, because this is a region. And I really am encouraging us to develop those relationships now. So we're having a problem. I mean, one of the things that happened a couple of years ago when other islands had the chikungunya, they had experienced it before Jamaica did. And so they knew what to do. And that's how we ended up knowing about the papaya leaf, because they had used it. Somehow somebody figured that out and used it on that island. So by the time it came to us, we had access to that information. And so we need to like start working our zone, right? Our sector, instead of like sometimes going, you know, too north, or, you know, that southern exposure stuff. So absolutely, 100%, we're going to do that work. All of us on this call is going to do that work.
That's right. We're all in this together.
Show up and listen to all these wonderful talks. But how do we now work together? You have something, Jennifer has something, Cecile has some information, else everybody that's here, there's a piece of it. So everyone has a piece, and we have to know putting the pieces together. So the next generation will have that information, right? So we don't have to reinvent the wheel again, unless you really need to.
Well, and that's these courses, these permaculture courses, or whatever course we bring together, it's yes, there's instructors maybe kind of leading the dialogue, but I am constantly just inspired by the knowledge that the group has. And there's no, like, I am a 40-year-old woman who's only had so many experiences in the world, and I know a lot of some things, and I know a whole lot less about a whole lot other things, and I'm learning every day. And that's what's so inspiring and so humbling and beautiful, is that I might know a little bit more than some people in certain areas, but you know a little bit more or a lot about this other thing that I don't know. And when we gather together, and it's again like permaculture, is the chicken alone is only a chicken, but the chicken integrated into the system is so much more. And so me alone, I'm only one person with my only very limited experience and skills. But when we gather together in community, how rich that information is, and how much we learn from each other, and in that dialogue, and what can come through in that. Every class I'm a part of is just so inspiring and so refreshing. And I learn as much as I teach, and we all give to each other.
Okay, well, okay, so we have Jen, we're going to do 3 more questions. I have Jennifer, she's typed in. I'm so happy we got something. Okay, the question is, what is an effective weed control for a community space? That was the first part. And then she says, I have noni, that is a medicinal plant that is taking over my farm, and it's hard to control because it sends out a lot of roots. Do you know the noni? People making. Okay, so that was our question for you. Maybe you'll be able to help her answer that one. And then we have Arlene and Michelle.
And so generally my weed control strategy is, you know, starting with that understanding of what it's doing and what the purposes are. Maybe it's a whole new commercial crop I didn't even know that I had that grows itself, that maybe I stopped fighting it, like noni leaf. If you can find someone who will buy it, because they need it in their salve. So noni leaf is an amazing painkiller, really, really great externally. People use it as poultices, or they put it in a salve or an infused oil, and it really helps people's pain. Or maybe for us farmers who are trying to pull out the noni and our back hurts so much, maybe we need to take all those leaves and put them all over our back when we go to sleep, and they'll help us be ready for the next day. But finding, you know, understanding it, finding a market for it perhaps. But other than that, it's filling in the space. And this is what permaculture does so good. is nature abhors a vacuum. They say, like, empty space, nature will fill it with something. So if you understand why that plant's doing so well, if you could find another plant that grows in the same way and likes the same things that you like more than the plant that's being a pain for you, you can plant that in that area, and it'll, if it's strong as the plant you're fighting, it will compete well, and hopefully it will take over with your encouragement. Things that spread by roots can be a little bit challenging, but because noni is such a nutrient dense plant, and this is the like comment I said earlier about if you can't beat them, eat them. There's like this negativity about weeding, and here it would be thistle, and it's like spiky and it comes up from the roots, and every time you till or dig, it just makes more. And I did find a buyer who would buy it for $7 a pound, and they juice it out of like a raw food juicery, which was a great
Wow.
market for it. Yeah. Because it's a weed, it like grows like crazy. I don't have to do anything. And so I found a market for it. But on top of that, just even this process of going out and be like, I hate you, get out of here, you terrible weed that's in my way. It just felt so like negative. And when I could change that to harvesting, or so like noni is a really nutrient dense plant. And even if you're not using it for yourself, which you know, I imagine you are, if you already know it's medicinal, doing those plant teas, like making it a fertilizer for the area. So then instead of you pulling it out thinking like, oh, this is terrible, you pull it out thinking, thanks for the fertilizer, thanks for the fertilizer. And every time you pick a leaf or dig a root, it's free fertilizer. So instead of having to go to the store to buy your nitrogen fertilizer, or go get back guano, or go clean your chicken coop and make your compost, you just take those leaves, you put them in some water, you let it ferment, it's free fertilizer for your system. And then over time, that change, and this is the magic of it all that I don't fully understand, I've only just experienced, is when you start changing the emotion around the action and you say, thank you for your work here, I appreciate what you're doing in this system. Now I go out to the garden sometimes and I'm like, I really want to make thistle lemonade. I can't find any thistle. And it just kind of moves out of the space because it's either done its work or been appreciated, or I don't understand all the mechanisms behind it. But over time, the whole relationship just shifts, and it seems very magical. And you know, things still get in the way, and things still are frustrating, but I try to find a way to love it for its work. And then, I don't know, the dynamics just tend to shift.
Okay. I hope that, Jennifer, I hope that answered that question for you. That was a great answer. Okay, we have Arlene. You can unmute. Are you there, Arlene?
Yes, finally.
Okay.
Hi, good evening, everybody.
Good
And
evening.
thanks for this lovely presentation. I was particularly interested in a couple of things you said early on, but I didn't hear clearly. Did you say that passion fruit leaf and flowers are used for mood, for happiness, to you know?
So they're not necessarily mood specifically, but although it's related because all the systems are, they're used for the nervous system. So anxiety brings a ton of sadness and negative feelings. And so it's this plant that if you're just feeling like anxious in your heart and your mind is racing and you're like sick to your stomach because you just like you're nervous about this thing, or what have you, you've eaten too much sugar, like if your nervous system is just like fiery and on edge, it's a plant that can just take all of that down, and it's just very calming to the whole nervous system. And so like you'll see those same, like we talked about Parkinson's and epilepsy, it's like a hotness of the nerves, and you just fire, and everything's very rigid and hard. And the nervine plants like the passion fruit leaf just kind of soften and help you just slow down and breathe and trust. And it just takes the edge off of all that stuff. Even like if you went out to a party and ate a ton of sugary cake, or you drank too much alcohol and you wake up in the middle of the night in this like detox of sugar stimulation to your nervous system, it just helps to calm all of that down.
Oh, lovely. So does it have to have the flowers in that tea? Or
No, you can just have leaf and vine is fine.
leaf and vine is good.
Mhm.
Good to know. And also I heard you talking about dandelion. Well, we have a different plant here that we call a dandelion. Dandelion. And it has seeds that we grind and make a coffee because it tastes like a coffee. But we also use the leaves, but most of the seeds. Interestingly enough, it doesn't look anything like your dandelion, but it has a similar nutrition and medicinal profile. That's the really really interesting thing about it. That the profile is so similar in the benefits. But it would be nice if when you're coming, just pack a suitcase of it, roots and all, and bring it down.
I'm
bring it down.
always smuggling things that I should probably not be smuggling.
Smuggler.
I get stopped at the airport all the time, and I have all these seeds, and I put them in my food bag with I have like a bag of pumpkin seeds and sunflower seeds, and then I have a bag of like lab or leucaena, and then they're like, "What is this?" And I'm like, "Oh, I'm on a raw food diet. I have to have a special. It's an all seed diet." And they're always like, "Oh, whatever." So I have no problem with that. I will smuggle as many different plants around the world as I can.
I don't mean to turn you into a smuggler.
Seems like this is a
But if
permaculture.
you're already doing it, I think we could benefit.
But it seems to me that this is something I see all the permaculturists do, right? They always are smuggling seeds and all plants, all kinds of stuff.
Bring in things. Let's change that
Right.
rhetoric.
We must share the seed.
We're bringing
Exactly.
beneficial things for raw diet.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because
So this is our last
I used to
question.
do that back in the day, bring stuff and stuff. I
Okay,
used
well,
to do that.
Arlie.
You give a new spin into it.
Okay, thanks, Arlie.
Oh,
Okay, so we never even know really what time we're supposed to be like an hour, but it always pushes over. So Missy, I'm gonna give you the last word, but there's such a couple good questions also in the chat as well. Okay, how about we do this? Missy, you ask a very quick question, and then I'm gonna try and pick one question from the chat because there seems to be a bunch coming in here about fermentation and
I was trying to
about the
answer
corn.
that.
All right, so I think we'll do some of that. So Mitzi, go for one question.
Okay, mine is really short.
Okay.
The weeds, when she's fermenting the weeds, do you like boil the water, or do you just put it in plain water and just let it ferment, or do you have to boil the water and put the weeds in it?
So I just an open container of water, and then sometimes I'll put a lid on it just to keep little things out of it, but it still has to breathe. So just room temperature water, or even cool water, because it'll warm up to room temperature. And then just let it ferment for here in Colorado, it takes 4 or 5 days, but in Puerto Rico, it only really takes a day or so, and you'll start to see little bubbly things going on. And then I'm free to use it at that point. And I don't use it on the top of the plants, just more in the soil, or in like a pile of leaves or a pile of wood chips. I kind of inoculate that with the liquid juices. The only time I will heat a tea and more make it like a tea like you make for yourself is like certain things like if you're having a lot of issues with your seedlings in your little trays of new baby plants, and you're having fungal issues, like they call it dampening off disease, this like fungal issue that eats the stem of the tiny plant, and then you come out and they're just falling over, like rotted. You can take something like chamomile or any antifungal herb And I usually make a hot tea with that, like I was going to drink it, and then I strain it out once it's cooled off. So you don't want to use the hot water because the plants wouldn't like that. And then I take it and put it in a spray bottle once it's strained out really good, and I spray it on my seedlings. And not only are they getting some of the minerals and things like that from whatever plant it is that I use, but if it's an antifungal plant, it helps to reduce the surface fungus on the soil and on those little baby plants so that they can get through and get a little bit bigger if they're struggling with that. So there's certain plants I'll do more like a tea for me, but generally those weed teas are just a fermented room temperature water open tea.
Quickly, which other
You was one question.
antifungal? Okay, all right.
One question. All right, because this other one is going to
Okay.
be good. So there's the Allens would like to know, would like to hear more about the cow horn manure process, and that seems to be a pretty standard thing. I always associate biodynamics with cow horns.
Mhm.
So tell us about that piece, because that looks.
Sure. And so we have two preparations that we utilize the cow horns for. And we utilize the cow horns because the cow and its horns, and if you look at one really closely, it has this spiral out. And so this spiraling, empty kind of hard bone type material is thought to connect better with the cosmos and the stars and the etheric unseen energies. They are like a radio tower accepting information down into themselves and into the cow, which is why we don't cut any horns off of our cows. All our cow horns come after the cow has been harvested or passed away. And the older the cow, and also that's really the female cow that we utilize the horns from, this like receptive energy of the feminine cow. And so then the horn manure is the manure of the female cows as well, stuffed into the horn, and that's to represent the earth energy and the quantity of the earth. So it's buried at a certain time of year for half the year, and then it comes out. And that's if you are needing more quality and more, more quantity, more substance. This is a really important one here for climates that we're at, 7,000 feet elevation. We have a lot of astral energy. We have a lot of sun. We have a lot of dryness too, a lot of force. And so this more earthly element brings balance to our system. The polar side of that would be the horn silica. So it's crushed quartz crystals, which is silica, crushed up and powdered and shoved into the horn and also buried. And so the cow horns are buried over the winter, the time when the earth, at least in this hemisphere, is the energies are in the earth. And then in the summer, the energies are in the sky. And so that's when we have the quartz buried. So the quartz is all about sky, celestial, cosmic. It's about quality. It's about bones and light. And so this is a really important one that I've been utilizing more in Puerto Rico than I do here, because there's tons of growth and tons of abundance and tons of water, and earth element is really, really vibrant in Puerto Rico, in this lower elevation, in this lower latitude. And so I don't have any issues with abundant growth, but I need more, like there's more fungal issues, there's more bacterial issues, there's more like loose growth and fleshy growth, as opposed to hard bone, silica, sunlight growth. Even though we get a lot of sun, it's a different kind of sun than what we have up here. Like I will burn here so much quicker at 7,000 feet elevation, my skin, than I do in the tropics. Even though there's a lot of light, it's a different form of light. And so you're utilizing these, whether it's those or the other preparations, to bring balance to the system And so if there's too much water, too much growth, too much fungus, everything's just growing, then you bring in the silica element to add strength and quality. And then here, if you have a lot of strength and quality, but small abundance and less watery, less earthy, then you use more of the horn manure to bring balance to that system.
Wow. Thank you for that. That was really great. Because we always see that and I'm always like, what is going on with that?
It gets a little weird sometimes.
You gotta do what?
It's kind of like you're making witch's potion a little bit and doing like weird little things. And the farmer here, when he first started doing it, he's a rancher. He's like a big guy with a big cowboy hat and more traditional rancher, originally. And he heard about it, but he likes trying new stuff. And so you're supposed to spray, flick or spray these preparations out under different celestial bodies. And the first time he did it, he's like looking around, like making sure none of his ranching neighbors can see him. And he's like kind of doing this little thing under the cover of night so no one would think it was weird. But now he's done it so long that he's just like, I don't care, like this works. And with the NRCS, the organization that does all the soil tests, and that's a university-based organization, a federally funded organization for soil science. Our representative that comes out here, he's like, I don't know what kind of like weird witchy under the full moon stuff y'all are doing out there, and I don't even need to know. Just keep doing it and don't tell me.
Because the numbers are there.
Because the numbers work. So if it works, give it a try.
Well, I am just so happy that you're able to made the connection, that you're able to come on, because we had been trying to, as I said, connect with somebody that understood it and be able to explain it so well. So we're just really thankful. And we are going to ask Nzinga to unmute your official closing. Are you there, Nzinga? See,
I'm here.
Okay.
It takes me a minute to find it sometimes. Forgive me.
Thank you.
Forgive me. But I know for sure I speak for everyone on this call, on this in this session, when I say this is probably one of the most informational, inspiring. For me, that's what it was. I learned so much, and not only learned, but also affirmed some of the practices that we do. And it's so wonderful to see that it isn't crazy. It's the way we look at it, and the way we practice and believe, because it's all connected. It's spiritual, it's physical, and it's grounding. It's amazing. And the way you brought it forth, Stephanie, was so clear. Your explanations were right on spot. I've seen so many people writing that in the chat, and you made it easy for us to understand. You spoke our language. So
we speak the same language.
Yes, we do.
It's the heart. The heart speaks, and the heart, like what you just said, a lot of this just sounds familiar because we know it somewhere. It's new, but it's old. And our heart is like, oh, wait a minute. No, I know this. I know this already. I'm just remembering.
I agree. I agree with that completely. And let me tell you, it's as if you've been here already, because I think we've all been here multiple times, and we can't wait for you to come back. So thank you so much, Stephanie. It has been amazing. I haven't even seen the 2 hours going by. It's almost 2 hours. It has been wonderful. So just a big thank you. Thank you for the time. Thank you for the information. Thank you for the fellowship, because really that was what I experienced with this call today. So thank you from all of us. And we look forward to seeing you.
Thank you from me. Hi, and my love from Colorado, and soon from your island neighbor. Just, such a pleasure to meet and work and commune with all of you. And I look forward to seeing you all in person one day. and many
Definitely.
more
We're gonna be working on
discussions.
that boat.
Yeah.
See you over.
To and from, because we wouldn't
Yeah.
mind going to Puerto Rico either.
We could do a whole loop.
I know,
think so.
seriously.
I love it. All right. Thank you and good night.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Okay.
Have a good night.
Have a good night, everybody.
Thank you.
So we'll see you
Thank
next week
you.
at 4, and I'll send out what the next topic is, but we'll see you guys next Sunday. Thank you guys all for showing up. Divine keeping city.
Thank you.
As my mom said, divine.
Thank you for
appointment.
having me.
No problem.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Nicola.
Bye.
Bye.